Well, welcome, Brooke Annibale, to the podcast. We talked a little bit before, about like a month ago, I want to say. So it's really good to have you on. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So, like I said, we talked a little bit before. Last time I talked to you, you were doing a show at Mass Mocha out in Western Mass, which I always say is
Mhm.
like literally the middle of nowhere. But that was a
Yeah.
big like deal for you because I think if I remember correctly, that was like one of your first really big like outdoor festivals in New England, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I hadn't ever been to that part of Massachusetts until after we spoke. And it really was like the last like hour of the drive was like all these back roads through through farms and stuff. But Mass Mocha is incredible. Like I had a little bit of time to walk around the museum and the show was great. It was really fun. Got to play with my whole band. And yeah, that was like one of maybe the first like handful of shows since coming out of having no shows and having a band with me too. So it was really a good time.
Yeah, it must have been good too. I should mention that you're originally from the Philadelphia, like you're from Pittsburgh, if I remember
I'm
correctly.
from Pittsburgh. Yeah.
Yeah. So for you, and you live in Rhode Island right now. So you've been in New England a little bit, but now it's
Yes.
like you're finally kind of getting your feet wet again in the Massachusetts and New England scene. Like you said, it's been a while since, you know, we've been able to play shows. So it must have been like amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been a New Englander long enough to have been converted to Dunkin' Donuts coffee, or I guess it's Dunkin', just Dunkin' now.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've had a lot of great shows in New England, in all the little listening rooms all over. And this one was different in the way that it was like a listening room, but it was also like this basically world-renowned museum, and getting to partner with them to bring people to a show. Like there were people that came just because they were like, "Oh, I wanted to come to a show here, and I listened to you," and
Right.
yeah, it was awesome.
That is awesome. And it must have felt good, like you said, to play with a band too, because we
Hmm.
actually mentioned this a little bit before. We had some technical difficulties recording this segment before we hopped on. And like you said, you've been doing some stuff like on Instagram Live, or you must be doing like, or have done some like smaller intimate sessions with just yourself, I assume. So like talk a little bit about that, like getting back out there and especially playing with like other people. That must be like a completely different feeling than doing a live or something from your bedroom.
Yeah, yeah, I did a lot of those like Facebook Live, Instagram Live, Zoom performances, and they're so weird because most of the time you're just playing to your own face and all alone, and you can usually see people's comments, but you can't like see their faces or like hear them respond to you. So it's a it was really it was really fun to be able to connect with people like that, especially early on in like pandemic lockdown days when I would go online and then there would be like people from Germany and California all in the same place, you know?
Yeah.
And but to get on a stage and play music with like three other people, that's really fun.
Yeah.
There was one live stream I did that I had my keyboard player like on my porch
Right.
and like ran the cables through the window and had him stand out there and I was inside, and we yeah, played a Facebook show that way. So that was like the closest I came for like 2 years.
Right, yeah. That's just like wild too to think about like shows coming back. Like I've gone to a couple of concerts like since COVID has kind of subsided a little bit. And it's
Hmm.
just it's so wild to think that those things are coming back. Because like you said, for some people it's been so long. Like,
Hmm.
like just having that in-person connection with people, especially for artists, I'm sure like makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Yeah, I had one of those moments I was on a short tour with this band in July, and I was watching their set, and like there was like one of those moments where like everybody was like standing up and like singing along or clapping or whatever, and I was like, oh, I forgot what this feels like. It was, yeah, it was really awesome.
Yeah. Oh, that must feel so awesome. Yeah. I love like going to shows too. And I have such a better time when I see like the artists having a good time. It makes me happy. I love seeing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
It's such a good feeling. I assume you must have played some of your newer music too at Mass Mocha, which is what I really want to talk about
Yeah.
because you are putting out it's your first studio album, I assume, right? Because you've had a couple projects before, but this is your first like studio album you're putting out later, right?
So this is my first record with a record label. All of my other records have been made in studios, but have been all independent releases. So
Right. Okay.
this is a new, like I've always just been completely independent. So signing with a label at the beginning of 2022 to release this record was a whole new world for me. But you know, a lot of it stays the same. It's just a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, what about some of the stuff that you have going on music wise? Like I remember in our last talk, we talked about like your music kind of having a bigger and bolder sound. And I actually was listening to some of your records before we hopped on, and I can notice a very distinct difference. Like maybe it's because you have signed with a label that you have a little bit more resources, or maybe it's something inspirational in your personal life. Like talk a little bit about that, like the progression of your sound.
Yeah, this is definitely going to be like a multi-layered answer for you, but I started making this record remotely in the beginning of 2021 with a producer out in LA, and we just literally sent each other like from my home studio. I sent him songs, and he would build them up, send them back, and I would, send new ideas, and we'd send it back and forth. And then after we were vaccinated and such, we decided to actually get together and make the rest of the record. And so it was just us two in the studio, which is actually kind of interesting because it turned out being so much bigger and bolder sounding, but it was just the two of us. And then we
Hmm.
had a drummer play on it. But usually when I've gone into the studio, it's like with a full band and we're all in there. And this way was so different, but also so rewarding because I love having like a one-on-one connection with someone. To like, I've always been like pretty introverted, so I maybe feel more comfortable in a setting that's just like two people.
Right.
But the cool thing is that I made the whole record independently, and the network liked it and wanted to put it out. So it was like, now I have a bunch of resources to get it into the world, but it
Yeah.
was just like purely that they liked the record, and that makes me feel good, you know?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that must feel so rewarding. Like, I think we hear horror stories sometimes in the music industry about labels not backing your project or your product. So that must have felt really rewarding that your label that you're now with heard your music and said, "We really like this. We're gonna put it out how you did it."
Yeah, yeah. There's so many stories of artists that make like amazing records, and their label's like, no, this isn't it. And then they leave and go to another label, and it's a huge success or something. But yeah, I haven't had experience with that because I've always just been, I do whatever I want in the studio. So it's cool that that it ended up being something that hopefully will go out into the world.
Right. What kind of drove you to signing with a label? Because, like you said, you've been independent for a while and you've obviously had a great amount of success. So, what kind of made you decide you wanted to take that step in your career?
Yeah, good question. Have been doing this since I was a teenager and have put out a bunch of records on my own. And I know how much work it is, and it's always going to be a lot of work, and it's always changing what, you have to do to share the music with more people. But having a team is like invaluable. So like anybody that is helping me talk about the record or come up with ideas, or it's just, I wanted to take a chance on trying that out, and
Hmm.
having the opportunity, I just went for it. Plus I've like network records when I was younger, like in college or something. It seemed like every CD I flipped over was like network records,
Right.
on the back. Like, they launched like Sarah McLachlan, and so just to be affiliated with the label that I have respected for a while also a really that influenced my decision.
Yeah, that must be huge. Yeah, I think I looked up their artists that they've had on their roster. Would you say the artists that they've helped launch, like you mentioned Sarah McLachlan just now, are those kind of artists that serve as your inspirations musically?
There definitely have been. Yeah, there was. I think I'm trying to think of all the people that I listened to that had influenced me at one point or another. But Sarah McLachlan, the Weepies, Maria Taylor, even like Avril Lavigne when I was just starting out. Like they were all um, on network, and so yeah, for sure.
Yeah. How would you describe your sound? Because those are like in the same wheelhouse, but you kind of touched upon, a little bit of a divergence there, I would say, with some of those artists. But how would you describe your sound coming from Brooke Annibale herself? Like,
That is such a good question because I never feel like I can pinpoint a genre for myself because it sort of fits into the singer-songwriter world, but everything that influences or inspires me is all across the board. Like,
mhm.
and so anytime someone says, "Well, what are your biggest influences?" I'm like, I could tell you the people I've been listening to for a really long time, but does that mean they're my biggest influences? I'm not sure. But like, I don't know. I like would make a list of people that inspire me. Like, okay, I'm really into the latest Harry Styles record. Okay, so
Mhm.
that's gonna influence me in some way. But
Right.
I'm also like, I've been listening to Elliott Smith for like over half of my life. Those two artists could not be more different, you know? So that's why I'm just like, what is my genre? It's like um, a spectrum of singer songwriter, pop, folk, indie. I don't know.
Yeah. But no, like that's a really good point that you bring up is like you can be influenced by so many artists and so many people that like it's by
Yeah.
the time, especially at this day and age with technology and social media and like there's so much crossbreeding now between genres and artists that it's like artists today that are, putting out projects like you with your major label debut. It's like where do you even begin to think about like I don't know where I pulled that from or I don't know where I pulled that from, like it's probably from this person I used to listen to, like you said, or this person who I just listened to. Like artists are pulling
Yeah.
inspiration from like everywhere and it's so insane.
Yeah. I was just, my next single that's coming out is called Be Around. And I was just talking about where the inspiration came from that. And it was really random because I had learned the Oasis song, Champagne Supernova,
Hmm.
and like just noticed how they were all these open chords in the verses, and then when the chorus hits it's this full major chord, and I was like, oh, that's why it feels so good when the chorus comes in and everybody just wants to sing along. And I went for that in my writing of the song. It doesn't sound like an Oasis song, but like just learning that song made its way into my brain while writing.
That's so wild. I love that though. Like it really goes to show you like what is in your environment just impacts you like subconsciously sometimes. It's just so cool. Like I could talk
Yeah.
about that kind of stuff all day, but I don't have all
Yeah.
day, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned you have what was that single again that you said is coming out?
Be Around. So that's coming out August 19th. So I don't know when this
Ooh.
will be out in the world, but yeah, that's the next single. That's like next week or something.
Yeah, that's really soon. Because you've put out like you've put that'll be your fourth, right? Because I have them written
Yeah.
down. Like you have Better by Now, which is also the name of the album,
Hmm.
5 a.m. and What If You. So you've put out a bunch of singles like before this album. Was that kind of planned? Like was this to help build up anticipation for the
For
major like
sure. Yeah.
project?
Yeah. I think that's sort of the new way of, with streaming and social media, like telling people, hey, here's new music like multiple times is
Mhm.
like the only way to be like, yes, and now there's a whole album. Um, but yeah, since April, I've been releasing a song every like 6 or so weeks, and
Mhm.
It feels good to be able to like, talk about the song for a period of time, because sometimes if you release like two singles, then the rest of the album feels like it gets like lost or something.
Hmm. Right. And do you think that's kind of helped you get a little bit more exposure? Like, have you had a pretty good response to the singles? Like, have people been following you closely, or have you been gaining more followers? So obviously with Mass Mocha, I'm sure you had people that might have just discovered you there as well.
Yeah.
And now it's like it's kind of, I think we talked about this too last time we spoke. You have like the perfect storm where it's like you have new music coming and you're also like performing again. So you're just collecting all of these names, I hope. And like people are
Yeah.
learning about you.
Yeah. And I think there's so many different things that have to happen at the same time for a song to be successful or whatever. But like watching, okay, I have more followers on Spotify as I approach the release of a new song. That's great, because that's the cool thing about streaming, is that if you've heard my song on a playlist or something, my new song might get fed to you in like your release radar, or
Hmm.
in some sort of algorithmic playlist. And I think the discovery in that is really cool. It's just a matter of whether those people come back and listen to the whole record, or, invest more than a listen.
Yeah, I'm curious because you kind of brought this up. This might not be something that you really fixate on because you're an artist and you just try to focus on the work. But do you have like aspirations trying to keep people to stay up to date with you and to follow your career? Like that's probably such a loaded question. So
Yeah.
I understand if you're like, I have no idea how to answer that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the pressure of social media is real. Sometimes I feel like I'm keeping up, and then other times I'm like, oh, I'm trying to figure out TikTok, and I feel like such a millennial, because it's like Gen Z's world on there. But yeah, I mean, it's really, I just try to present everything in the most authentic way that I can. I like to talk about what the songs are about and what inspired them, and how they hopefully connect with people. And so that's just what I do, and hope that it works.
Yeah. What do you think with this new batch of music too? And we can touch on some of these singles. Like, what do you think they've kind of done for you in presenting that authentic self? Because I think I remember last time too, we talked about a lot of this album was inspired by your recent marriage and moving and things like that. So have you felt like this batch of music has kind of helped you present more of your authentic self to your fans?
Definitely, because in the past, I was writing about these deeply personal feelings and not really talking about what they were about.
Hmm.
And now it's like, oh yeah, this song is about my wife, and I feel like that in and of itself is just like, here I am. If you like me, great. If you don't, okay. And like just being at peace with that, it will find and connect to who it's supposed to.
Hmm. Totally. How do you think, do you kind of have your hand in everything when you put together your albums or your tracks? Like, do you also help out with the production and whatnot?
Yeah, and especially with the way that this last record was written, I was at home a lot, working in my home studio and coming up with ideas for a little, like, piano part here, harmonies
Hmm.
there, and just a lot of times I will have sort of like I'll have a reference playlist that I share with whoever I'm working with, and say like, I really love this style of guitar playing or keyboard playing, or I really love the sound of this snare drum, or how this builds. And then that's you know that's sort of all the pre-production work, if you will.
Hmm.
And yeah, I really love that part of the process.
Yeah. So I assume you've been doing that for a while. How is it kind of same thing with your sound? How's it kind of like progressed now as you're working with a major label? Like, you have those resources like you mentioned. So is it your production value, would you say, has it kind of gotten a little bit more intricate or like I don't want to say advanced, but like has it gotten a little bit more like shown a little bit more of a like progress from when you first were putting stuff out independently?
That will, I guess time will tell on that because still I've been working with network since after I made this latest record, but um yeah, I feel like it just the more albums that I put out, the more that I learn, a couple years ago I didn't have the home recording studio setup that I have and wouldn't have known how to like I actually engineered some of the guitar and vocals on my record because I was recording from home and then sending them to the producer
Right.
um, to EQ and mix and make sound better, but I still did that from home. And it's cool because like any artist can do that at home and have like the same level of production quality, if you will, as if you go into a major studio. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's an interesting time in recording.
Yeah, I'm curious too, because you just brought this up. Were you more comfortable like recording at home in your studio, or do you like physically going to like a studio to record?
um I really like going to a studio to record. I don't know why. It's just sort of like there's this dedicated space and time for making the songs that you've been working on like come alive. That's how I
Hmm.
always describe it. It feels like they're coming alive and like you're experiencing it for the first time. And that's like my favorite part of my job.
Yeah, that's awesome. And like you said, now you kind of have that option with COVID to like winding down. You can actually go to the studio and work with people. So like
Yeah.
it also is like, people working from home. I think we could all use a little, maybe like a little separation from being home all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Like the project that I mean, this record, when I went out to California to work with my producer, he was like, I think this is the first time I've worked in person with someone in 2 years or something. And we
That's
just
wild.
had such a good time.
Yeah. Wow, that's so cool. So also you have a tour coming up in support of this album, and I believe your tickets are
Yeah,
on sale now, right?
they are.
How does that
Yes.
feel? Are you excited?
Yeah, definitely. Anytime you're trying to sell tickets for a show, it feels like majorly going out on a limb because there's a million things people could do with their lives on that night. But I'm going to Europe for the first time, which was supposed to happen in 2020 and is finally
Wow.
rescheduled a little smaller scale than I was going to do in 2020, but just happy that for right now it seems like I'll actually get there.
Yeah.
um, and yeah, and then a couple of US dates in October and November. So yeah, it's exciting to go out and share these songs.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited for you. That definitely sounds like you're really getting out there again, like you said, and hopefully everything's coming alive, like you said. We'll use that term. All of your things,
Yeah.
your project, like the songs, the experiences, it's all coming alive for you. So that sounds really, really awesome. And I wish you the best of luck with everything.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you again, Brooke, for coming on. This was a blast. Why don't you let people know where they can find you to keep up on your music, updates, with your tours and whatnot, so people can try to tag you and come see you.
For sure. Yeah, I'm on, Instagram, Facebook. I'm on TikTok. I usually do my weirdest things on TikTok.
As
um,
expected.
yeah, it's just I kind of love that. It's like, well, anything goes. But my website will have all of my tour dates and such, and it's just brookeannibale.com, and my name is spelled weird, so it's ANNIBALE .com. And yeah, I hope to see some folks on the road.
Yeah, and it's the official date for the album is September 30th, right?
Yes.
All right. So Better by Now, Brooke Annibale. It will be out September 30th. Can't wait to give it a listen. I'm really excited. So I'm definitely going to give it a listen. And I suggest everyone else listening give it a listen. So
Yes.
thanks again, Brooke. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. Thank you, David.